Hello, everybody. So this is the last lecture, module 7. Again, a couple of announcements. That one, I forgot a midterm. The exam, the final exam. Again, it is pulling from the same question bank as the quizzes. But I believe I mentioned it before. I am not a big fan of everything due on Sunday night at midnight. It's not good for a break. Exams are usually worth a lot of points, and they are always on different schedules. So remember, exams are on a calendar schedule, which means Sunday at 12 a.m. till Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Also, for next week, obviously the due date changes from normal because the semester ends on Sunday. So make sure everything is turned in before then, and I will send out reminders about the exams. I'm not trying to trick you with it. I do really believe that schedules should change. Should not be 11:59 p.m. in every class, or every 11:59 p.m. on Sunday night in every class. It's not good practice for the real world, and changing that around means last minute in my class is different than the last minute of your other class. So most people wait till the last minute anyway. So couple last minutes can be nice. There's a reading assignment this week, but no quiz. It was a bunch of useful tips, and I started copying and pasting to put the quiz together, and there weren't very many questions. It's like, these are silly questions. So I got rid of the quiz part, but makes sense. So it was useful information in the chapters, so I would recommend that, as well as I put one in, same thing for next week. Chapter 19 has some useful information about workflow and how a good strategy for approaching it. Now that I think about it, that might have been good before we started the group project. Jump ahead and read the chapter with tips on working as a team on GitHub. That would have been useful in module 5, but it has some useful tips. So some useful information, but there's no quiz on those, no question banks, so they won't show up on the exam either. Just remember, it opens on Sunday at 11 exactly midnight and closes at Saturday 11:59 p.m. Reading assignment, yeah, useful information, but no quiz. So there was storm moving through the other day. So one of the things I wanted to cover over the other day, we didn't quite see. When Nathan got here earlier, he pointed out that I started making that assignment. Apparently, I didn't save all the changes from what I got. I copied the module 7 assignment and started changing stuff, and apparently I didn't adjust I didn't save all the changes because some of it was still the same as module 7. So it has been changed now. We're just making a CI/CD pipeline. We saw that earlier in the semester. I wanted to look at it again because it's due this week. The pictures for CI/CD pipeline have improved. I was drawing one earlier today, and I thought this is much better than what I had in mind to diagram when we talked about it 3 weeks ago. I'm always looking for improvements. So the traditional fence, I color-coded version. So we'd have our software, which would be a file, all right, application. There's our app. And the traditional fence, we would take that and install that on the user's computer, some version of it, right? Version 3.7, version 3 update, or version release patch. Yeah, version 3 release 7 patch 12 maybe. So the 12th patch on the 7th major release of the 3rd major module, all that versioning system. It worked, but there's some drawbacks. When patch 13 comes out, can we rely on that end user to bring that in? Or are they going to keep running on 12? And then when they hit whatever we fixed in patch 13, jump on Facebook and tell everybody they know the software doesn't work. Start bad mouthing it. We also depend on the user's configuration. We have no control over this part. That's all on the user. That's where containers came up. I'll leave that in red. So the first step for replacing that was the idea of a container, where we would create a virtual machine. So we are completely in control of those configurations. And then that virtual machine we install on their software. We have a lot more control. We don't have to worry about somebody digging in there, deleting files that they don't know what they are. Our software depends on it. It's a famous one from the world of game development. A long-running game. You may have heard about a picture of a pineapple. It's a JPEG of a pineapple. But some of the original code, they don't have the text version anymore. All they have is the compiled version. And somewhere in that compiled version, it asks for a picture of this JPEG of a pineapple, which has not been used in a long time if it was ever used past the debugging state to begin with. But nobody wants to dig through the compiled ones and zeros to try to figure out where it's asking for that. The text file is long gone. They don't want to start over because everything else works. So there's just this extra JPEG in the game that, in the long running series of games, many games, this has been going on for decades. That's why I think you probably may have heard of this story. But seen jokes about it or something. Pineapple.jpg, if deleted, the program will crash, will not run, period. And so just leave it in there. And it's part of a series. So those games have been developing more games on that, and they're just leaving it in there because the original text file is gone. Then nobody wants to dig through those ones and zeros and try to figure it and reverse engineer wherever it's asking for it. It's a lot easier just to leave it in there. But something with the configuration files. If a regular user decides to be like, what's pineapple.jpg? I don't need that. You delete that file, the game's going to quit working. Or other stuff, things that our software completely depends on, they might decide to delete it. Then our program's going to crash. We're still kind of at their mercy, but with a VM, if we put our software in VM, we're in charge of the configuration. And in order to mess things up where that VM's going to crash, where that virtual machine's going to crash, we're going to have to break the real system too. So it won't just be our software that quits working by the time the user does something that breaks it. It'll be their entire system, and the blame won't come back on us. It would still have version numbers and stuff. And lately, what's become more popular is CI/CD pipeline. So still containers, but that container is going to be stored on the internet somewhere. And so instead of giving them that, we have that uniform resource locator that says where that's at in the world, somewhere in the world. And we just give them that. With the containers, there's still going to be a version number, right? 1.2.3. We're still giving them releases of that, but we have the internet. The original idea of that really made the internet take off in 1989. Instead of giving you the data, why don't I just tell you where the data is at? And you go get it when you need it. So now installers can run a lot quicker because all we're installing is the URL. We still give them an icon, so it looks the same to the user, but when they click on it, instead of starting up the virtual machine and running our application, it goes over and grabs that from the internet and brings it down, and we can have GitHub or something halfway started so that the virtual machine is booting up en route across the internet, and we are completely in control. All they have is the URL, so they never have version 30.7. Every time they open it, they get the latest version of the product. That's our continuous integration and continuous deployment. And pipeline just means the output of one pipeline is the symbol. It's the symbol above the enter key, the vertical bar. That means the output of one thing goes to the input of another thing. So the output of from GitHub, we're going to do our GitHub packages. So the output for GitHub packages pipelines into their local computer. We use that word a lot, but it's just that simple. Let me show a quick example. I was thinking about this a few minutes ago. It's like, I know a great example to show exactly what a pipeline is. So this one goes all the way back to the 70s. So it's a nice simple example. I'm going to open up Ubuntu here. That'll work. And my WSL Windows subsystem for Linux. If I need the IP address, it's a subsystem, so it comes in as a network, part like networked instead of a separate virtual machine. As for the IP address, and there's a whole bunch of information there to dig through. I can go in there and find it. I guess that one kind of stands out. It's not hard to find, but I know what a label is on that. So if I take IP address and pipeline into regular expressions and look for the pattern INET, which is the name beside it. So pipeline the IP address into the regular expression so I can pull up just the things that have anything to do with an IP address. That's what a pipeline is. And really, we say pipe, but that's simple. The pipeline, we're creating a tunnel, basically, so that in our case, the output of GitHub packages has a direct tunnel, a direct route.
There is
so
some
the
risk
output
going
becomes the input, goes this way.
With the ICD pipeline. There would be some risk there, especially when you're talking about, when it gets into businesses and system administration, and that businesses typically want that, I mean, like here, I don't know how many teachers I've seen still running Windows 10 versus 11, for example, or the school computers are, I think they're all up to 11 now.
This can actually, this is generally more secure for that reason.
But you're allowing a third party to dictate your update.
Well, not necessarily the third party. We are, because we're going to use GitHub.
Right, but I mean.
But it doesn't have to be a third party.
But I'm saying, like, so my application, I've written an application to replace Word. I'm using that, and I've gotten companies to use it, and I push an update. Wouldn't that automatically update them to my newest update? They do not want to utilize it because they haven't validated it
so
in their system.
Internally, they would set up a new one from yours.
Okay.
So you would just prepare that for.
Okay, so they pipeline to their server, and then they pipeline. Which
you pipeline to them. They grab the other end of your pipeline, and then they create a pipeline to go out to the user.
Okay.
So there's layers of it. We're using a third party, but doesn't necessarily. And everything, all the configuration is back on this side. That includes all the security. So if it's over here, we can have security experts set up the protection, not just random person that has a computer.
Okay.
So it's generally more secure. But because it's generally more secure because there's computer experts on this side. It could be left unsecure, but typically not. But that's so we want to. That's the standard way to release software these days. So I wanted to at least look at it. It's not standard. There's no official standard to do it that way. It is more than 50%. It's past halfway. So I guess the majority of software is released that way.
It's fun. I just when my magazines came in, the editorial article, which I haven't got a chance to read yet, other than the introduction, was how containerization is not the end all be all, that everybody's
Oh, no,
And I'm like, all right, what's this
it's
about? Because I'm
useful.
just now learning. Yeah.
In 2023, it has more advantages than disadvantages. That can turn around quickly. But right now, because of the prevalence of the cloud, which caused traditional server setups cost to go down, this became more beneficial than the old system. It's definitely not the end all thing, but it is, yeah, it's past 50%. So going into the field right now, we're definitely going to see it. So it's fairly straightforward. We're going to look at Docker. That's a easy one to start into. Yeah, when we looked last time, we installed Docker Desktop. I'm going to do it without Docker Desktop this time. Y'all can go ahead and use Docker Desktop to follow along. I just want to. The difference is I'm not going to start Docker Desktop. Docker is a Linux application, and we do have Windows subsystem for Linux now, which I highly recommend. There's lots of reasons why programmers often prefer one of the Nix systems, usually Linux because it's cheaper than what Mac has, and we have more control. Apple still wants to lock things down from us. With Linux, we have total control. So if you just type WSL -- install, that will put a Ubuntu machine, virtual machine on your computer, networked to what it is. And Docker's a Linux thing, so we can run it on. We just have to run it on Linux. I don't think I have it installed on Kali. Let me check. Just to show you the process, Docker. Yeah, it's not on Kali. That was an error. So I'll install it on there when we get there. Docker is not our only option for containers. Docker is definitely the easiest option for containers. That's why we see it in the classroom. Kind of like the same reason Python is the most popular programming language in the world. It's the easier option. And yeah, if we can, we're usually going to take the easier option, right? So there are alternatives. What can I search? Alternatives to GitHub. Alternatives to Docker. Oh, yeah, I didn't have to search for it. We were just talking about this. It's not big. Yeah, it wasn't because the computer was listening to us. It was because lots of people want to know what the alternatives to Docker is. So we haven't looked for it, but lots of people in the world have. 11 best alternatives. That sounds like a good place to start. Vagrant's going to be on here near the top, probably. That's probably the best option. Oh, Builda. Builda is awesome. Builda does not require us to run in a terminal or a desktop app or anything. You know how when you open VS Code, it just looks like a traditional desktop application. The Electron framework is a web application. That was the originally nice point about it. There's nothing unique or special about it. It's a decent text editor. But when it first came out, it was a decent text editor as a web application. Microsoft just grabbed that open source code, put their name on it, and pushed it out. Part of the reason I don't use it because they grabbed open source code and put their name on it, which isn't illegal. They kind of did it to prove to people that it wasn't illegal because some people thought that was legal. And were like, no, look, boom, and it took off. But what was really nice at first is it was a web application that had good editing, good text editor, and a web application. But the way it just opens up, it looks like a traditional desktop application. So the container, I guess on this picture I drew on the board, you could think of that virtual machine being squeezed in tighter to the app. So there's no extra stuff. Like there's no Docker running, there's nothing. So our app is squeezed in there as tight as it can. When you open on your desktop, that is a browser. They just put it in Edge and took the address bar away. So you're actually running Microsoft Edge is the application you're running. It's in a container is Microsoft Edge, and they took the address bar away so you can't go to a different website, is what VS Code is. So this would look like that. You have that virtual machine that only runs your app. And you don't see any extra stuff because I guess the part like Docker would be built into the machine.
Right.
So it just starts on its own. That's the way to say it. Yeah, the starting part is built on its own. It's called daemonless or demonless, depending on how you want to pronounce that word. Some people like to have that the part included. So there's the Linux one, Vagrant. That I knew that was going to be near the top. This is probably the best. When you start one, unlike Docker, it's kind of like you open a text editor with a blank file. So you have to build everything. You have absolute control over it. So if you're getting paid by the hour, that's really, really nice. But it can take a while to build every single thing you need for that virtual machine and put your stuff in there and have it load itself or something else. Lots of alternatives. Containered is more for running on the cloud. Oh, zero VM. That one's kind of nice. Zero VM is. Does everybody know how Google does their applications, like Android and Chrome OS? The really nice thing about them is they only run lots of virtual machines. Every virtual machine, every application is an independent user, and it's a virtual machine. So they're all, every application on Chrome OS or Android is an independent standalone thing. They don't depend on each other, and they can use each other. So why it's easier to write Android apps than iOS apps. Because if you need, if you're in an iOS app and need to access the internet, you have to put all that stuff in there. And put your security measures, you have to tell it what URLs to go to, and what protocols to use, what to do when you download the stuff. But on Android, you can use the browser. You can just have your app say, you just tell it what URL to go to, and your app will just broadcast, hey, I need to go to the internet, and the browser will respond and go to the internet for you. So they're smaller, self-contained, independent. So this gives us that. It's also a lot more, at least the security stuff. But that's a really nice way to make containers. Your stuff standalone, you can put it on any machine. And these aren't new ideas. This is why Java, this is how Java was cross-platform in 1991 or 2, when they were making it a remote control for a TV, before it even became its own programming language. It runs on a virtual machine, and it wasn't a new idea then. Containers have been around for a long time. But yeah, like you pointed out, Nathan, sometimes they're better option than others. Right now in 2023, they are a much better option than the alternative. I'm not familiar with Podman. Y'all can read that build kit. Oh, Run C. Run C is what Docker was built on. So if you just don't like Docker, you could build your own alternative. This is the open source project that's targeted as Docker. RKT. But you can see there's lots and lots of alternatives. Docker is by far the easiest. That's why we're going to look at that. So to create a Docker file or a Docker project, I guess first off we need a project. Anything open in Sublime, that should close. Yep. Close that. Documents, delete folder, new folder, and trying to rename it. There it goes. A container. That sounds like a good name for the thing tonight. So we need some sort of application to put in here, which that's not the point of this lesson. So I'm just going to do a simple hello world, something trivial. I'm not even going to do the fancy 3 different versions of hello world. Just do one of them. I'll open Sublime with the current folder and git init current directory. That work. I'm gonna skip readme and just jump right to the parts we need. I'll keep the clutter out of there. So Sublime greet.py. Just trying to keep clutter out of here. Define, say hi, and I'll return hello world. Then our God. Okay, so nothing fancy there. I didn't want to put any clutter in there, so. Almost as trivial as it can be. We can test it and all that, right? Start the Python interpreter, run greet.py with the say I parameter, and we get hello world back. Have y'all ever seen that before? You've probably seen Python greet.py, and that starts the thing, but we can ask for functions afterwards. So I just asked for it right through the terminal instead of running it. I guess I could take this out. Nice. So it's in that module. Python greet.py, but instead of running that, then a space and just run the say hi method out of there. We get the Zoom calls out of the way. Or Zoom thumbnails out of the way. Whoops, wrong button. That one. And do this because that I almost fit. And that's a way that we can just call that one method. Why did that not call the method?
You returned something, but you didn't actually do anything with the return.
I should have printed from here. Oh, wait, Python-m greet.py. Say hi. Is that what I gotta do? Attributor, not found on greet. Python-m greet, say hi. Okay, I'm missing something. I'm not sure why, but I'll just go back to what it was. I was gonna try to subtly sneak in something about Python, but I can't remember what it was that I was gonna do. We should be able to just ask for particular methods. I guess y'all would have seen that with Django, right? With the manage.py script, and then we ask. What am I forgetting here?
Yeah, because you do manage py dot run server, manage py.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, I'm forgetting something, but those are just functions built in the script. We could run it afterwards or change it, but
You can try the 3, sometimes like Python 3.
oh, possibly. You can give that a try.
Mine doesn't work with just Python, just works with Python 3.
Yeah, I was just trying to work in something new that y'all probably haven't seen. So we're doing something with Python, but it's a trivial part. I'm just gonna jump back to the stuff we were getting to. There was supposed to be a clutter-free example. That's why it was small. So then the stuff we're familiar with, the stuff this class is actually about. So commit. I'll just do it the regular way. Create things. Oops. How do I get that on there? That's good. So we've got something in our repository, and I think it works this way, right? Python greet.py. Okay, yeah, that one works. So we have our application made, probably an application much more interesting than that one. We need to containerize it. And Docker is the easiest one to use. To do it in Docker, it's all pre-built, and we just create a special text file that will run through an automated process with a few keywords in it. There's not even very many keywords in it. What does matter is we have to call it the same, a specific thing. Has to be Docker file, all is one word, capital D, no extension. Because it goes through an automated process that people do not put any error handling in. So it looks for a file named Docker file and then gives a trace back if that file doesn't exist. So there's, yeah, as long as you remember how to spell Docker file. And then we use a couple keywords. So like from Python 3. That's the one I want. What did I use last time? I should be somewhat consistent with what we did earlier in the semester, right? Workflow test, I think it was in that. Oh, that's Java. Unless I deleted the one from earlier in the semester. Hello, Docker, that's the one we did. Nope, that's Java. Did we not do a Python one?
I think we did Java one. We did Docker, I have it.
You scratch this. Okay, so I guess I didn't do one, so I'm gonna do Python 3. We must have done Java. Yeah, I know I did Python when I was getting ready for that, and I think we did Java in the class. So
Yeah, it's Java.
So we're gonna look at Python 3. And then we can add stuff from that, look at different repositories, because there's lots and lots of slightly modified versions of Python 3 that we can pull down. I'm just gonna try to pull down a generic one. And so that's the virtual machine. There's a pre-built virtual machine for Python 3. Actually, there's lots of them. Let's look at the list so you can see the list instead of just saying that. Python in Docker. Build your Python image. Python repository. Python repositories in Docker. There we go. Here we go. So here's all the different ones we could use. So we can say from 3.12 OB4-bookworm. Any of these tags we could put by that from one, and those are slightly different versions of Python 3. Python, the official image, Docker pool. Yeah, any of these words we could say from that repository. And there's lots and lots and lots of them out there. Those are just the official ones. If you start digging around through the list, just search for Python repository in Docker. You can see which ones to pull from. What we want to do, we want to copy that file we've made, copy greet.py to the place we're working at. And we need to set up a working directory. And this is going to be somewhere, a directory on a Linux machine. So that first line, Python 3, is say that sets up a virtual machine. There's one already built that we can pull from a repository and use. That's what makes Docker so much quicker, usually, because and all the other ones we have to build a virtual machine ourselves. But Docker has an open repository that uses Git version control to set up lots and lots of virtual machines in advance to make it easier. And we need a working directory, and that working directory is where are we doing the work on that other machine. I don't know, I'll make a folder called /app/ I'll just make a folder called /app. That's an easy name. We make up the name. If you're not used to Linux, the one restriction is just like on a Windows machine, you know how we always start with the C drive, C:/ starts all of our directories, or D drive, or whatever our drive number is. On a Linux, we always start with that /. So just, as long as the directory name starts with a slash, you can make up whatever you want for the rest of it. There's no modules imported, so we don't need requirements or anything. Probably should have done something that we would do run if we wanted to, so like run requirement .txt, because that's something we would
We can do
normally
that
have.
after the fact too, so that if we say add emoji to it, we can update it.
We can do that later. I think we might run short on time, but should we do the requirements TXT or do y'all? Yeah, it's probably gonna be on yours, so we should do something. Instead of just mentioning it exists, so like you said, import emoji and return emoji.emojis. Hello world. Colon thumbs up. Which I don't think we're running my Sublime. I'm running Terminix here. Python read.py. Yeah, I got to check it over here. Oops, not in the chat room. Wrong button.
Does PowerShell not support tab autofill?
It does. I turned it off. I turned that off as much as I can in class. Sublime won't let me turn it 100% off. Is why it still shows up there. But it gets in the way in class examples. I like autofill, but if in a class example, if you're trying to follow along, that box is popping up constantly.
I mean, for like in PowerShell, like just tab autofill folder names. Because I do that a lot with folder names because I hate typing, especially if I left a space in it.
It's not the tab. It's okay. It is tab. So it only goes so far.
Yeah, or if you start typing, it'll finish.
Yeah, so documents, tab 1, so Blender.
Or if you just start typing, you hit tab 2.
Oh, I'm just hitting tab. So delete, and then I can push over and push the right arrow and do this. I thought you were talking about predictive text. You can also pull it up as a predictive text box.
Oh, okay.
And then just
I didn't know that.
scroll down. That's the one that gets in the way. That's the one that just gets in the way really bad in fast examples. That's the folder I want to go to, and then Python create.py. There we go. So we got our thumbs up emoji. But that means we need to make sure that's in the manifest. Pip freeze. This is what virtual environments are for. If we were to run that in a virtual environment, that would be the only thing we imported. So then our list is one long, but I usually do a factory reset on my computer every 8 weeks, so that prevents me from that deters me from doing virtual environments because the list never gets very long. I keep factory resetting the computer, and so I'm going to copy that and emoji 2.5 clear and create Sublime requirements.txt. Did you see what I did there, Sam? I ran pip freeze.
Okay.
And that pulls up all of the stuff. That's why we use virtual environments. So we created a virtual installation of Python, a fake installation of Python, and then needed to use the emoji library. That would be the only non-default one installed there. So it makes the list short, and then we can do pip freeze, append that into requirements.txt and just have one line instead of copy and paste. Yes, Python, Ben, have you seen that? You will soon, if not. I don't know if Mike showed that in your class in the spring.
I don't think so.
Okay, it's useful. I use a different one. I usually use pip.
No, he did show pip.
Pip for VIN. No, that's not it. Pip. Pip in. That's what it is. I use that one. Which has some advantages over that default generic one that comes with Python. So I always forget VIN. I would pull it up and show it right now, but I would probably get half the things wrong because I use a different one. But it's we have the requirements thing, so I copied that, and our software depends on this software. Whenever we run pip, whenever we do pip install, in the background, one of the first things pip does is pip install requirements.txt-r. Can I make that full? Will that show full screen? Yeah. So pip runs that with no error handling. So if you don't have a file named requirements.txt, it's going to crash as soon as somebody tries to install your stuff. So even if it's blank, you still have to include it because they didn't even put try catch there that doesn't do anything. They just said, go ahead and do this. And it's been that way for 20 years, so they're probably ain't going to change it. But it does that. And and what that does is it goes through this list and installs everything, which is already installed on mine. Oh, whoops. -r comes first. Pip install -r requirements.txt. And requirement already satisfied, so it's already on here. It's not on Docker though. So our Docker file needs to know that. So we better copy that as well. So also copy. Docker file is in the same place. Well, I haven't saved it yet, but it's going to be in the same place as that folder. So it'll be able to access requirements.txt. This one can look a little confusing. Let me type it the confusing way now. I think I cleared it up, tried to clear it up earlier. So this dot refers to our project here. This dot refers to the working directory. Does that make sense to everybody? Because that's something you might have to do periodically. Use dot in two different ways of the same instruction. The first dot here, so copy from the current directory, greet.py, and then it's going to jump over to the copy function. And this is a pipeline. So pipeline this from the local machine to the virtual machine. So this one refers to the virtual machine and the working directory we set up there. It's very confusing to see dot used the two ways in the same instruction. Unless you've been writing code for a long time, because that's a common thing in C++. So in C++, we can explicitly define what every symbol does. So we can define lots of symbols to do one symbol to do lots of things. And if we put it in the right place, the computer will figure out which one we wanted. Most languages block that because it's confusing and difficult to work with. But this is one that you will probably see there. So I'm going to put it in there. Hopefully that makes sense. So that'll copy it to the virtual machine. And once it's over there, we better run that requirements.txt. Run pip install -r requirements.txt. And that'll install everything in our manifest, which I assume everybody's project has something in the manifest. So we went ahead. Put that here. So that this becomes a copy and paste to your project, and all you have to do is change that name and that name to the files in your project. Or actually, you wouldn't change that one. That one's already in your project. You change that name and copy and paste that line for all the files in your project that you need. And then we can run our command. Once we have all the packages installed, we will run a command, and we want to run Python and give it the greet.py. And anything else, it just keeps going in there as a list of commands, and it just comma separates them and puts them in the terminal. The array syntax isn't my favorite, but you see it a lot, so I guess a lot of people like it. I prefer the ones where we just type it like we would in the terminal. because I think typing Python space Greek.py space next parameter is easier than closing the quote marks and adding commas and all of that, but we see both of them. So that we can use to build a Docker image. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to jump over to my Linux virtual machine and run Docker without the desktop. Because you're probably wondering about that. When we saw earlier, we use Docker desktop. And like, well, what if the user doesn't have Docker desktop installed? We can't run it from the background. We need WSL. So you would, whoops. Backspace there. Then Alt-2, so I don't have back cursor in more than one spot. Control N. So we write a PowerShell script that said like if not WSL. So this is PowerShell thing. So if we pass in the command WSL and it throws an error, then that's false. So if we get an error when we try to run the WSL command, then we want to do WSL -- install. We'll install it, and then we'll say Ubuntu, start an Ubuntu, probably a machine, because this will put an Ubuntu machine on there. And then we can install Docker, which I'm getting ready to do on a Kali machine. So you'll see that instruction. Actually, yeah. Install Docker and then do Docker pull our URL. And then this would be the script we install on somebody's machine. If they don't have WSL installed there, run install WSL, turn on WSL, switch over to an Ubuntu machine, and then probably the same thing there. If not Docker, if we get an error, if we type in Docker and get an error message, then that counts as false. So if it's not installed, then install it. And once it's installed, just pull the URL from GitHub. That would be the whole script. That's what our actual installer does. That's all we put on there. So it's going to be a really quick, easy installer. We don't have to do that part. We're just making the pipeline tonight. We have this. I'm going to run it from the Linux machine. So I can do, because Docker is Linux software. Switch over to my Kali machine. I could just click there. So it doesn't have Docker on there. Can't quite run it here. So to install Docker, super user do, if you're not familiar with Linux, that's our root permission without actually going switching accounts and all that. Super user do some stuff, and we want the super user to look at the app repository and install docker.io. So that's that line where I just put as a comment. We don't even have to have super user do it. Oh, whoops. Then we have to type Y. Hopefully that was the only time I have to type Y. Let me cancel that. Super user do stuff, and we want to go to the app repository, install docker.io, and then -Y, go ahead and confirm all of the places that we would ask that. That way we don't have to keep hitting -Y over and over again. I have a feeling it was more than just once. But that one line, I was downloading slow. You can see it's 36 megabytes. 36 megabytes should not take very long to download in the modern world.
On the days when that was 3 megabytes, with hour wait, and you got your one zone, and it's corrupted.
Did it crash? Why did that crash? Sudo apt update. Sudo apt upgrade. Maybe I need to update. I can build the image locally, or I can run it on Ubuntu. That was the instruction to do it. I have it on Ubuntu, that's why I didn't go to that one first. Okay, so not an error message. So in an if else statement, that would count as true. Errors are false, reasonable return, some sort of any other return is true. Anything that's not explicitly false is true. If it runs through the full adder and subtracts and we get a difference of 0, then as opposed to everything else. Yeah, so Docker's on there, so I can change directory. The amount of drive c/users/print/documents/delete. And this is where when the subsystem is nice, I still have access to the Windows machine, so I don't have to copy and paste to a virtual machine or anything like that. Which I guess we can't even really copy and paste to a virtual machine. Have to upload it to a file and or maybe email it to ourselves and then download it from that email on the other machine.
Where I email myself,
So we'll navigate into that. And this is why I mentioned it the other day. I usually like to change my prompt, customize my prompt so that I only see the last folder. Because we can pretty quickly run out of room to type in the folders. Lots of folders are better for the computer. If you had three lines of code you needed the computer to run, you're probably going to put it in one text file and one folder, and then just run it from there. It is better for the computer if there were 7 or 8 folders deep, and then a file that had one of those lines, and then another path where there's 7 or 8 folders deep, and then a file with one line. That's better for the computer, but obviously that's awful for us to navigate through. And we're the ones that make the decision. So it's harder for the human, but it's better for the machine to have long directories like this, and then less things in the folder. All of those can translate directly to RAM addresses. The more folder names we have, especially if they're unique, the more likely it is we can translate them directly to a hash table and get almost to electricity speed. A hash table aligns perfectly with like a RAM chip. Some pins going in and some pins coming out. When we can do that in our code, we basically end up with electricity speed from the machine. But we end up with long names of folders like this. I think I'm in the right place now. So Python greet.py. Oops. I'm on Ubuntu, Python 3 greet.py. Oh, don't have that installed here, but that's okay because you're going to install it on the Docker machine. So we do have a Docker file. So we're on Docker build the current directory and -t, which stands for name for some reason. This goes in a column called repository name. I don't know why they went with -t there, but -t does actually stand for name. And then we need to give it a name. So let's call this, I'll just call it greet. It does not have to be the same name. Actually, I'll call it hi there. Hi there. It does not have to be the same name. It usually makes sense to give it the same name. Oh, repository name must be, okay, I guess I can't do that. Docker build .-t, hi there, in all lowercase letters. Oh. Sorry, I'm pretty sure that one was just from being here since 7:30 this morning. Full access denied to Python repository. Is that not the name of that? Python in Docker.
I got an error, local metadata for docker.io, library, Python 3 latest.
Oh, Python :3 dot, yeah. :3. We'll try that. Okay, sorry, Python language and then colon for version 3. While that's building, I'll come over here. I forgot the colon. Apologize for that. Again, I'm gonna attribute that to being here since 7:30 this morning. I drank a whole bunch of caffeine right before our course, but it only woke me up so much. It's not that long of a day. It's just longer than my normal routine. Longer than the routine I've gotten used to. So it finished pulling all the stuff, extracting all the libraries. Still just a few things to copy. Which the internet's just going really, really slow.
Yeah, let's go now.
It's going slower than what I've gotten used to. I guess I do remember the 1990s. I do remember the days of 56 kilobits per second.
2400.
I remember
28.
14.2.
Oh, yeah, 28 kilobits per second.
I got my first 28.8 modem. I thought I was king of the world. Then 56K came out. I'm like, oh. Then shotgun modems where you use 2 lines and 2 modems simultaneously.
Oh, yeah, back then if we saw,
SDN.
yeah, I don't know why this is going so slow, but yeah, back then if we saw 211 megabytes, we just give up. It's like, oh, well,
Yep.
I'm not even gonna try.
I had a what was called a shotgun modem. It used 2 modems, 2 phone lines, simultaneous connection, and then they eventually came out to ISDN where it was doing essentially the same thing.
Okay, so those our container build. If I come down here, we're not, Docker desktop is not running. So that's how we do it without installing that Docker desktop software. But I just wanted to show that for your projects, you should probably continue to use Docker desktop in the class because it does make everything easier. We don't need to do it the hard way, but just to show you that eventually you wouldn't be trying to install Docker desktop on people's computers. Although in 2023, you can count on Docker desktop being on probably 50% of computers. It's very, very popular right now. Then we can run that. Oops, where's my poster? There it is. Docker run -ti for interactive terminal. And we want to run, we could ask for the name, but when we get to our pipeline, we'll need to pull from the IDE. And we get our thing there, even though when we tried to run that on the Ubuntu machine, there was no emergent library, so it just crashed immediately. So we can see it's not running on Ubuntu there. I guess that does serve as good proof for that. So that's the Docker file, and this is getting after we take a break, that's obviously going to be uploaded to GitHub, which means you all will be able to just copy and paste that and change that to the name of a file in your project, copy and paste it, and copy and paste that line and put in the names of files in your project. The same thing down here when it starts, whatever the starting point is, and that one should be good. You can just copy from that, but in the assignment, I put 2 videos there. The 2 videos I put there are optional. You don't have to watch them or anything because GitHub will generate the entire YAML file for us. But if you're curious what's in the YAML file, both of those, well, for one, both of those people they do lots of really, really good tutorials. They do great tutorials. They're very explain stuff in depth. I usually watch them at an increased speed. I watch about everything at double speed, and So I want them to increase at double speed and can follow along, but they explain what the file is very well. You just have to, you can use automatically generated one. And there are lots of people that do it for a living that have no idea what is in that automatically generated file. They know it works, right? This is software development. Computer scientists worry about the optimizations and explanations and making it work as well as it possibly can. Software developers, we just worry about works. And that's good enough. So we need to upload this and automate this process so that we can get to our pipeline. Because right now we're at that red level. Right, we had the original one, we could download something like SourceForge. That's the one I usually use. SourceForge. I was going to look at this next week. Oh, not SourceForge. Something for InstallForge. It's made by SourceForge. What is all?
No, there was a source for it. I know what you're talking about.
I don't want install. Yeah, this one. No space, because apparently a space just gives you a bunch of Minecraft stuff. But this builds the exe installers, the .exe. If you're on a Mac, Apple build package PKG. During the break, I'll pull up. It just builds the installer. You just kind of fill out a GUI, and it creates that exe installer. That's the one step by step. MSI installer is the ones you just start and they run. The equivalent on a Mac is an exe is like a PKG, where it pops up a window and you click through and maybe adjust some options. Yes, and the MSI is equivalent to the DMG on a Mac, where you get a picture that says drag this icon to your other folder, and you just drag it over, and everything's automatic. I'll pull up the one I like on a Mac after a break, just to point towards that. We'll look at them next. Actually, we're going to look at those next week. I'll pull up the one I like on a Mac next week. It used to be free. It was free for years and years and years. They just started charging $3.99 for it, but
Is it
on the Apple store, it's $3.99. You can still get it for free.
They got to pay for all those USB cables you have to start providing to your phones now.
Something like that. There's some reason or another why Apple needs another $3.99. But as far as Apple's, if you're a Mac user, you're used to that, right? That's normal, and $3.99 is not bad for that stuff. But that's something we're going to look at next week. We need to get this up to GitHub and build our pipeline, or click the button to generate the pipeline. So really, this is going to be reminding you where that button is. But first off, maybe break, and then sound good to everybody. My laptop says 7:08, so we'll get back to it at 7:18. See y'all in just a moment.